Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to dive into building a dwarf army list. So I told you guys I was going to do this video, and I think it's important for people that want to get into Warhammer Old World, but don't exactly know where to start or build a good list. And I think that unlike 40k, we're at that point in 40k where there's just so many balance patches and things like that. Generally speaking, if you're getting into the game, you buy a combat patrol, you're gonna do okay. If you know the rules of the game, you're gonna do okay against your friends. However, Warhammer Old World is a different beast. You really do need to know what you're doing in order to build a successful list and also just not break the rules, right? Just basically being able to build a legal list is a skill in and of itself. And what a lot of people will do is they'll try to get into the nitty gritty of this and they'll find out that there's a lot more than they bargained for. And maybe, you can't get a certain unit here or you can't get a certain upgrade there. So I'm going to share with you guys my kind of method to building lists in Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer Old World that I developed over the course of many, many years of building terrible lists as a child. you know, a little sixth, seventh grader, not really knowing what they were doing. And hopefully, I can share that with you guys so that you guys can, build lists that are a lot better, first of all, but also just a lot easier in general. If you come in with a game plan, it typically goes a lot easier and you'll spend a lot less time writing the list. Because these kind of old world lists can easily take people 3-4 hours sometimes. And I know that seems like really insane, but with all the little tinkering and stuff you can do with the granular points and stuff, it can really get to be a mess. So we're going to be looking at the dwarves first. We are going to be doing one of these for the high elves as well. I did dabble in a little bit of high elves, and I do know the high elves a little bit better than other factions. So after we do the dwarves, we'll tackle them. All right, so first thing to note is the composition list. Now, this is pretty much the same for every army. Every army is going to be limited to what they can take. You can spend up to 50 points of your army's, points values on characters. They go into specifics. You can only take one king, one anvil of doom, or rune lord per 1,000 points. So in a 2K game, you can take two of these things. Then, of course, you can take any number of Thanes, Runesmiths, Demon Slayers, Dragon Slayers, and Dwarf Engineers as long as you follow the rule of three. That's something GW came out with that, in casual games, you don't technically need to follow this. If you wanted to, you can have an entire army of Slayers, but, you could have all your Demon Slayers, Dragon Slayers, and all that, and just Slayers in general. I don't think... You still need core, though, so it couldn't be full Slayers, but it could be mostly Slayers. But following the rule of three, you can't do that. So, what are we going to do? How do we start this off? I think the starting point is the hardest, but what I've always found to be very useful is just start off with what you need. You need at least 25% of your army's points value on core. If you're playing a 2,000 point game, that's going to be 500 points, which is significant. A lot of players think that's kind of like a tax. What I think it is this is your chance to include units in your army that are good at holding the enemy in place and screening. So the dwarfs have 3 core units, and you can take 1 unit of rangers, which we are going to do, guaranteed. Rangers are one of the best units in the dwarf codex or dwarf army forces, so we're going to do that. But we're also going to be taking either dwarf warriors, quarrelers, or thunderers. Now, we are going to look at those data sheets and compare them for you guys, but I'm going to say this right here now. The really the only 2 options you have are dwarf warriors and quarrelers, just in terms of competitiveness. Thunders are okay, but they're not as good as these 2 units. So dwarf warriors are really good at holding enemies in place. Quarrelers are good at, kind of whittling the foe down a little bit before getting into combat. They're not as good in combat as dwarf warriors, but they are decent. They're not like other ranged troops from other factions that are just absolutely horrible. They can, in fact, stay. So we're going to talk about that. Then our special choices as well. We have, you can take up to 3 cannons, 3 grudge throwers, or 3 bolt throwers. Basically 3 war machines per 1,000 points. That means in 2K you're going to have up to 6 war machines in your list. You do not need 6 war machines, and I do not think you should have 6 war machines. You can also take 1 unit of hammers in special per king or thane. That means if you don't have a king or a thane in your list, you cannot take hammers. Longbeards, Ironbreakers, Minor Slayers, and Gyrocopters are also in this section. Those are going to be the units that you're going to rely on the most. namely iron breakers and gyrocopters. For rare choices, you have rangers, iron drakes, and gyro bombers. Really, the only ones that are good here that you're probably going to use in this slot, rangers are good, but you're probably not going to use them in your rare slot, is the iron drakes. The Ogren gun and the flame cannon just don't do enough, in my opinion, and oftentimes will let you down. Gyro bombers are fun, and they can be good if you roll good, but they're very high risk, high reward. We're not going to worry about allies. We're not going to worry about mercenaries. We are going to have a battle standard bearer as well in our list. That's basically a requirement, even though you don't technically need to have one. I guarantee you, you're probably going to need one in your army. So let's go ahead and look at what we need. And the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go up here to our Dwarf 2,000 points. And I already have it listed out. This is our 2,000 point list. We're going to be making a balanced dwarf list today. There's many different types of dwarf lists you can make. Combat oriented, you can make a full shooting dwarf army if you wanted to. But we're going to go for a more competitive and balanced list. So the first thing I'm going to do, which is required, is you need a general. Now your general is going to be the one that's leading your army, and it's going to be the one that you're going to use its leadership for to make break tests. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're just going to type in king and leave it at that. Now a king, if we look in the dwarf section, whoops, wrong one, a king is 125 points base. Now we're not going to give it any upgrades yet. The reason being is because I've always been a follower of a good army is better than a good general. Your general is there for one purpose, and that is to boost the morale of your forces and add a little bit of combat resolution to whatever combat he's a part of, and just basically hold and be, kind of not die, essentially, right? Especially for dwarves. You don't want this guy to die, but he's also not going to be slaughtering entire regiments by himself. That's not his job. He's not going to be on a dragon or anything ridiculous like that. And for the points you would pay to make him good enough to actually kill units by himself, it's just not worth it at that point. You're spending over 3 times the amount that you should be. So we're going to just keep it at 125 for now. We are probably going to give him something, but it's not going to be a ridiculous thing, right? So we're just going to keep it at 125 base and leave it at that. So that's our general right there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our core, or excuse me, our BSB. Remember, because I told you guys we do need one of those. So our BSB is going to be a Thane. So if we look back at the Forces of Fantasy here, we see our Thane is 60 points. And a BSB, if we scroll up here, is 25 points. And that's what we're going to do. The Battle Standard Bearer is very important. It allows you to re-roll your break tests, right? So your king is giving you leadership 10 on your break tests. Your army is normally leadership 9. And you're getting to re-roll that because of the battle standard. You can also put different runic talismans and stuff on it, which is, pretty good. It can get pretty powerful, but again, we're going to leave that to the end. The important part is you get to re-roll your tests. So if you roll that unlucky 11, you get to re-roll it. So we're also going to have a Thane. That's just going to be 85 points. Whoops. Yeah, 85 points. Okay. Laugh at my horrible typing. All right, so that is what we have so far, right? And we bring up our little calculator. That is going to be 125 plus 85. So we're nowhere near our 1,000 point cap with Lords and Heroes, so we know that we can add more there if we needed. We're probably going to add a Anvil of Doom at one point and stuff like that. So we're going to leave it like that for now. And we're going to look at our core choices. Now remember what I said about core. You're going to take a unit of Rangers because you can. There's no reason not to. If we look at this, you can take one unit of Rangers as a core choice. There's no requirement for it. You can just take one unit. So we're going to go down to Rangers. Rangers are fantastic. I think you need them in every single army. At least every single dwarf army that, you're running. So scroll down there. We'll look at all these other ones later. Quarrelers and Thunderers, or Rangers. Here they are. Okay, so they're 11 points apiece. Now, what I would do with them is I would take a unit of 10. A unit of 10 will give you enough firepower to ice out things like a enemy wizard that doesn't have much armor. If your opponent has a wizard just by himself out there, it can do very decently against that with crossbows. because they have ballistic skill 4 on average dice, if they stand still, they're actually going to be able to kill that wizard outright. So your opponent has to be careful when deploying their units. That's going to also be, well, okay, so that's what you're going to do, right? They're very good at basically being able to ice out lone characters. But what they can also do is take throwing axes. Throwing axes are very good. So let me just show you what throwing axes do real quick. If I can find it, hold on. This is the Force of the Fantasy. You know, I'm not 100% on all the rules yet, but throwing axes are pretty good. They basically give you a pretty good, yeah, here, it's right here somewhere. Let's see, throwing axes. Oh, that's melee weapons. Throwing spear, bows. We're almost there, guys. Pistols, Peters. Okay, thrown weapons. Here we go. And it's specifically throwing axes are what's good. The throwing weapons aren't so good, but throwing axes are good. So they do give you +1 strength. So if we look here, we have strength 3, so they're going to be at strength 4, which is very important. And they have quick shot. So they are 9 inches, which isn't great. But the good thing about this is they are, you know, able to actually basically ignore the penalty to stand and shoot for being under range. And normally, so if we go up to quick shot, normally you can't stand and shoot if your enemy is within a certain range for a charge, but if you have quick shot, you can. So this is good. This basically means that you could do a stand and flee reaction with them. Or not stand and flee, sorry, a stand and shoot reaction with them, and they can get some extra attacks in. So let's take a look. Has to be up here somewhere. You know what? I think special rules might be down here a little bit more. Let's see. Okay, that's not going to be it. War machines. Man. Long rule book. That's another reason why I think, unfortunately, I love this kind of rank and file game, but it is a little bit much for a new player getting into it. So I'm pretty sure quick shot, yeah, just allows you to, you know, basically stand and shoot within half range, but let's just double check. Troop types. Got troop types here. We'll go over that as well. They're also, oh, here we go. Okay, quick shot. Where is it? Did I skip it? Oh, here it is. Okay, does not suffer the -1. Oh, for moving and shooting. In addition, a unit equipped with this special can make a stand and shoot charge reaction no matter how close it is. Okay, so it is also just doesn't suffer the -1 to hit, which is really cool, right? So that's really good. That means they're hitting on 3s, regardless of whether they're standing and shooting or not, right? Well, I think if they're... Let's check if it's Dwarven crafted real quick. Okay, so that's that. Let's check if it's... Yep, Dwarf crafted. Okay, so Dwarf crafted means you don't suffer the hit modifier for standing and shooting. So you are always, unless they're in light cover or they have some other benefit, you are always hitting on 3+. That's really good if you have a unit of 10 of these guys. It means you're taking out 2 or 3 models before they charge in. That's really good. These guys are also pretty cheap. So it's going to be 12 points apiece. So that's going to be 120 points for the unit. The old Deadeye is worthless. You never want the old Deadeye. Gives you an extra attack, but that's not why you're taking these guys. So we're just going to have 10 Rangers. No command. We do not need a command with this unit, and that's it. If you wanted to, I would say a musician, just so you get that +1 to rally, but because dwarfs have such high leadership anyway, if you do choose to flee as a reaction, which you're mostly not going to do, but if you do choose to do that, then, you know, the musician can come in handy, but other than that, it's not great. So that's what we're going to do. Now, how do you use these guys? Well, I talked about this a little bit in my last video, but move through cover is really good. You get these guys in cover, you start shooting at enemy units that appear, start whittling things down. Even if you're not doing super, tons of damage to them, you're, kind of pinging off ranks, things like that. And then when the opponent tries to charge you, you make a stand and shoot reaction with the throwing axes, kill even more, and then they will probably kill you, but if you're in cover, you can bait an enemy unit into a forest or something like that, and they're basically stuck there. Unless they have move through cover also, they're going to be stuck there for a lot of turns, and it's going to be really annoying to get out. So Rangers are just really good, guys. Take my word for it. You don't need to give them shields. You don't need to give them great weapons. Of course, if we have some extra points at the end, I guess we could throw them on there, but it's not worth it. So we just give them the throwing axes. That is going to make them 120 points. And if you really didn't want to take warriors or anything like that, whoops, you could always just do more of these, got like a big unit of these guys, but I just wouldn't recommend it because then they start being an actual, you have to start using them differently at that point. Rangers. With throwing axes. There we go. 120 points for 10. We'll have 10 Rangers. They also have skirmishers, so that means that they can all shoot. They're not going to be winning combat anyway, so you might as well just make them skirmish. Okay, so that's 120 points of our 500 points. Now, the next question is, should we take quarrelers or should we take warriors? Now, here's my advice to this. I think realistically you're going to probably want to mix. The reason being is because quarrelers are pretty decent at shooting things, but if you already have rangers and you're going to have war machines as well, I don't think the quarrelers are really that worth it. I think you're more than likely better going off with warriors. Reason being, warriors have better combat stats, and that means they hold better. Now, let's go back to warriors real quick. Now, is holding better super good with dwarfs? Well, yes and no, right? On one hand, yes, quarrelers can hold pretty well as also, but if they lose combat by too much, then they're going to do what's called a fallback in good order, and that could mess up your formation, and it could allow space in your line for other faster moving things to get through it and get to your war machines. So yes, quarrelers are good. They can definitely hold, and but the problem with that is that they fall back in good order, and then your opponent can sweep in. Dwarf warriors, on the other hand, are going to be harder to hit, and they're also cheaper by a little bit. So I would actually go with Dwarf Warriors if you're going to field a lot of war machines. If you're not going to field a lot of war machines, I wouldn't do it. The other thing about Dwarf Quarrelers is that they have, well, their crossbows have the, I think, cumbersome, I think it's called, or something like that. And it's basically a -2 to hit if they move and shoot. You're going to need to move and shoot at some point in the game, so they're just not really going to be doing that much damage at that point. So, you're going to probably give these guys shields. They're going to cost 10 points a model. They're a little bit more expensive. They don't hold as well in combat. I don't know. I mean, I think they're still good. I just think you're probably going to want to go with Dwarf Warriors as a staple unit to hold the line. So, I would go with these guys. Also, the other thing to mention is that your opponent scores points based on if they can kill your unit or not. Because of this weapon skill 4 versus weapon skill 3, 3, they are going to be able to kill your unit faster. So, do I think they're good and do I think they have play? Absolutely. But I think if you're making a balanced list, you already have war machines, you already have shooting, you're better off with warriors. So we're just going to go with warriors for now, but there are some good arguments for quarrelers too. So we're going to give them shields. We're going to give them shields for 1 point, so they're going to be 9 points per model. Now, they can also take great weapons, but they have to choose what they fight with. I don't know if this is really worth it, but we're just going to take the shields. You can only fight with one weapon at a time. So in combat, until you're disengaged from combat, you can only choose one or the other. So we're going to choose shields because we want to benefit from shield wall, and we want this unit to be a holding unit for our other forces. So we're not going to give them veteran, we're not going to give them drilled because they're not going to be moving that far, and they're not going to be forced to take a bunch of leadership tests because they're going to be leadership 10 with the Lord anyway, so they're going to be fine in most cases. So we're going to take a block of 20 of these things. Now, you don't need 20 because they're heavy infantry. You could still have the same ranks, just of 4, and you could have them in, 16. But we want to reach this 500 point mark. So we're probably just going to take them in units of 20. So if we do some quick math on this, right, we got 9 times 20 equals 180. So we're going to have 2 units of these, and that's going to be 360 in total. So we're going to put 20. Oh, excuse me. You know what? I'm forgetting something very important. The command. It's going to cost 15 additional points for the command. So let's go ahead and get our calculator out again. And we got 180 plus 15 for the command. You need the full command on a combat unit. That's very important. It's going to be 195 times 2. You're going to get 390. And that's actually going to put us just above the 500 mark. So that's actually perfect for us. So we're going to have 2 units of 20 Dwarf Warriors. 20 Dwarf Warriors with shields and, and full command. By the way, you could just say full command and most players know what you mean. So we're going to have full command. Boom. That is going to bring us up to 1d5. Right, we're going to have 2 units of these guys. Now, what this is going to do, this is going to give you a solid block of Dwarf heavy infantry. And this is going to be hard to actually kill. Right? This is going to be a hardcore to kill. Yes, over the course of the game, if you're engaged with something really fierce, you're going to die. But you're getting good armor saves. You're getting a 4+ save with the shields. You're also able to kind of benefit from that high leadership. You have a full command, so you have good combat res behind it. And, you do have weapon skill 4, so you're a little harder to hit than most other units. And you have toughness 4, of course, because you're dwarfs. Okay, so in total, right now, we're sitting at, it's going to be 390, and 390 plus 120 is going to be, God, I'm bad at math, 510. Right, so we're just above that. So we're good. We're good on our core. We don't need anything else. Now, if you wanted to, you could, just do 20 Dwarf Warrior Shields full command, and you could break this unit of Dwarf Warriors up into 2 units of quarrelers if you wanted to. But, my recommendation is that you just have the Dwarf Warriors. The other thing to keep in mind is 10 Dwarf Quarrelers are easy pickings. If your opponent has a fast-moving cavalry unit or a fast-moving, kind of monster or beast or something like that, that's easy points, right? They're going to charge into that unit, they're going to kill them, they're going to break them, and then that's it. Chariots especially are really effective, even against heavy infantry, just because of the fact that they really just have a bunch of impact hits. Okay, so we got our core. Now we have all of our requirements, right? We have our core and we have our general. So what are we going to do next? Well, what is something good to back up Dwarf Warriors? Because they don't really do much damage, right? So we need things in our army to do a lot of damage. Those are going to be our war machines. So those are our special choices. There's no war machines that are worth it in our rare, so we're just going to go right to the special. Now, we have a couple of options here. Now I'm going to go down to the war machines just to show you guys what we have available to us. If I can ever find it. Okay, here it is. All right, so we have bolt throwers. Now, bolt throwers are pretty good, but they're better against many ranked opponents. They're cheap. They're only 55 points apiece. But, here's my thing about bolt throwers, right? Is that they're only ballistic skill 3, so they're mostly going to hit opponents on 5s. And that means that for every 3 bolt throwers you have, only one's going to hit. That's not great. Now, there are runes you can take to upgrade that, but by taking the runes, you're actually just making them more expensive. So the reason why way back in the day I actually liked bolt throwers is because they were cheap, but you could also give them engineers with +1 ballistic skill. So it was actually back in the day 60 points for one of these things, and they were hitting on 4s. To me, and you could take them in units of 2. That was back in the day. So in 8th edition and 7th edition, I actually liked bolt throwers a lot more. But right now, I have to say, they're just not doing it for me. They're decent. Don't get me wrong, they're decent because they don't have to roll in the misfire chart. But at the same time, dwarf artillery is some of the most accurate and some of the most reliable in the game. So we're going to skip those for now. We're not going to do bolt throwers. Again, I think if we had an extra 55 points or something like that, we could throw one in there just because, but we're going to skip that for now. The grudge thrower is probably what you're going to go with in most cases. It's extremely good. First of all, it is a stone thrower. And stone throwers with template weapons are extremely good in this game. They roll a scatter dice to hit, so you don't need to worry about ballistic skill. You have about a 33% chance of a direct hit, but you have the chance of it not scattering too far. So if you hit the middle of a big unit, a result of a 2 or a result of a 4 on the artillery dice will still guarantee that you hit something. So your chances of hitting something are actually a little bit higher than a bolt thrower. Now it is more expensive, but it hits a lot harder. The center of the dot hits at strength 8, and the other, surrounding, whatever's caught in the surrounding blast is hit at strength 4. It does have AP -1, so that means units with light armor don't get a save. If they have light armor and shield, they're only getting a 6 up. If they have heavy armor and shield, they're only getting a 5 up. That's pretty good against heavy infantry, and it's really good against light infantry. It's also doing D3 damage to units under the hull. So, it can actually do some decent damage against big stuff too, which is good. You would think that that's the cannon's job, but the grudge thrower can actually do it pretty well. And there are some runes that make these guys more effective. So I think these are either what you want to go with grudge throwers or the cannon. Now the cannon's good because you roll the artillery dice for it, and you don't also have to hit. You basically do this with it. You position it a certain amount of inches away from an enemy unit that you target. And yes, before you guys say anything, there's some cases where you won't have line of sight to one target, but you will to the other, and it might actually bounce into both targets. This is one of those cannon skills that people learn playing fantasy. Yes, technically you can't target that other unit, but if it bounces into that other unit, what are you going to do, right? So I know that seems kind of cheesy, but that's how the rules are written, unfortunately. Okay, so cannon. What does it do? Well, it has very powerful attacks. It's strength 8, does D3 damage, and it has pretty good AP values. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it has AP -3, but I'm just going to check again because I want to make sure. I don't want to say anything that's not correct. So let's see. War machines. Okay, it's not here. Just want to show you guys in the actual rules here. Okay, it's we're coming up, guys. We're coming up to it. Hold on. Somewhere here. Here we go. Okay. Bolt thrower, stone throwers. Yeah, see, I mean, this is just... Look at how many models it's hitting. It's hitting 4 automatically, and it's hitting, what, 4... Jeez. I can't even count right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's hitting 12 models on a 4+. That means, on average, it's going to hit 8 models. It's just, for anti-infantry, that just, you can't beat that. Okay. Yeah, see, it says 4 hit automatically and 12 are hit on a roll of D6 on a 4+. Whoever, I don't know who it was, but somebody in one of my early videos said, no, it's, it's all a 4+, everything. Nope, if you're fully covered, you're still hit automatically. It's just the ones that are partially covered that are hit on a 4. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, so stone throwers also have indirect fire. I did not know that, which is cool. So if you wish to fire indirectly, declare that you will do so before taking the war machine shot. An indirect shot does not require line of sight, but otherwise treated as normal shot. If an arrow is rolled in the scatter dice, resolve the scatter as normal. If a hit is rolled, The shot does not land on target, as would normally be the case, but merely scatters less, depending on the skill of the crew. Okay. So it always scatters if it's indirect, but you minus the ballistic skill of the crew. Okay, good to know. So you can't really hide from this thing either, which is great. Okay, the cannon. This is what we came for. Yes. Okay, the cannon is AP2. That's the dwarf cannon. The great cannon for the Empire is unfortunately better for some reason, even though the dwarfs are like renowned for their, war machine skills. I don't know why, but there you go. So Armor Bane 2 as well. So if you roll a 6 to wound, it's doing an additional 2 AP. You're probably not going to get this too often, so I wouldn't worry about it. Cumbersome means you can't move and fire. It does have also move or shoot, so you can't choose either one. And it has multiple wounds at E3, which is what we thought. Now, cannon fire is how it shoots. So, right, you select a range. It bounces, or goes an additional, I should say, it goes an additional amount on the artillery dice, and then you roll the artillery dice again, and it bounces that far. Pretty simple. Takes some getting used to, but it's basically a way to get around the hit roll. Now, the other thing is models that get basically hit are auto hit. There's no 4+ involved, so that's also good. Okay, so a thing to know, a cannonball that hits a model with the troop type monstrous creature or behemoth stops immediately. Or if it hits impassable terrain, it stops immediately as well. It does also have Grape Shot. Now, this is kind of what makes the cannon worth it, in my opinion, because it has the ability to just auto-hit within 12. So if you kind of position your guys correctly, if they're able to actually defeat your dwarf unit, and they choose not to follow up and get engaged again, that could be an issue for them. So if they ever fail to, not re-engage, you have cannons right there. They can just Grape Shot the enemy unit. It's amazing. Right? And the good thing about this versus the grudge throwers, there's no real chance of scattering onto your own troops with that close of a range. So, what does this thing do? Well, it's range 12 with strength 4 AP -1. That doesn't seem great, but its special rule makes it good. So you roll an artillery dice. Obviously, if it's a misfire, it's a misfire. But if a number is rolled, the target suffers that many automatic hits. Guys, this is the old organ gun. It's just a cannon now. This is the old organ gun. Now, the old organ gun did have a higher strength, but essentially did the same thing. You rolled the artillery dice, it was that many hits. This is incredibly good. This is incredibly good against high armor value units, exactly the type of units that are going to be charging into your dwarf warriors and actually beating them in close combat, right? That are going to be, like Bretonnian Knights, for example, are a really good example of this. So, yeah, Grape Shot is good. So you have a choice here, right? You can either go with 2 cannons, or you can go with 2 organ guns, or grudge throwers. So here's what I would do. I would actually pick up 1 grudge thrower, because you're going to want probably 3 war machines. I would pick up 1 grudge thrower, and I'd pick up 2 cannons. Now, it's up to you how you guys do this. You can do them in any, kind of order that you want. It doesn't really matter. The reason why I'd go with 1 grudge thrower, though, is because you already have a good number of units that can deal with enemy chaff, right? You already have dwarf warriors, you're gonna have iron breakers, you're gonna have these hardcore dwarf units that aren't going to lose combat to something like goblins or Empire State Troops. What you are going to lose combat against is things like knights, things like dragons, and Grape Shot, or just your standard, D3 wounds wounding on, 2+, are going to be better against those targets. So, I would do 2 cannons and I do 1 grudge thrower because, there are cases where you do want to whittle units down, cause panic checks, stuff like that, just mess up your opponent a little way. So that's what we're going to do in this list. We're going to have 1 grudge thrower. And that's going to be 95 points. And we're going to have 1 or 2 cannons. And they're 100 points apiece. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, what about the runes? Proxy Hammer, what about the runes? Well, we are going to put runes on these guys, but again, we're going to wait until the end to see what we have points for realistically, because we don't want to just throw a bunch of stuff on there and then, basically have to cut stuff from our list later, right? Okay, so there are our war machines. We do not need any more war machines in our army. However, we still have up to 1,000 points to spend here. Now, we're not going to spend the full amount, obviously, but we're going to need a unit that can really just basically break an enemy charge. We're going to need a unit that can stand up to the most elite that the enemy has to offer. Dragons, dragon ogres, you know, I don't even know what else. There are hydras, whatever you're fighting against. This unit can stand toe to toe with it and win. There's only one unit that can do that in the entire book. And I'm going to show you which one it is right now. Definitely not miners. Ironbreakers. Why are Ironbreakers good? Well, they're only 15 points a model. I know that may seem really expensive, and it's decent, but for what you get, it's really not. You're going to want at least one unit of 20 Ironbreakers. Now why? Well, because they come with hand weapons, full plate armor, and shields. They have a 3+ armor save base, and it can get even better if you have things like a runesmith or a rune lord in your army. Especially the Anvil of Doom, which we are going to add in later. They have weapon skill 5, which means they're harder to hit in combat, and they also hit harder. Strength 4 is always good because they hit at a higher strength to do more damage. But they're not really taken for their damage. They're taken for their ability to negate damage, which obviously means, because they strike last against everything, that they're going to be hitting enemies harder because they're going to have more attacks back. You're going to obviously want the full command. Now, the Ironbeard, the unit champion, can take brace of Drake fire pistols or Drake gun. I would say forget this. You want your Ironbreaker, your Ironbeard, to be as survivable as possible. You do not want to basically have your opponent attack this guy and kill him. So if he's getting a 3+ save, there's a good chance he'll live. If he doesn't, 4+ is kind of iffy, especially if they have AP. He can also take Cinder Blast Bombs. I like Cinder Blast Bombs. They're not the greatest, but we're going to check those out too. This might be something you add on later on, but we're not going to add it on right now. You can purchase weapon runes for him. Again, useless. You're not going to do that on something with only 1 wound. They can have Drilled, which is just, again, it's not good. These guys aren't going to be moving too much anyway, so you don't need it. And you can purchase standard runes of up to 50 points. This is something we might do, but we might also put it on the BSB. So we'll just see. Again, we're going to have to wait to see what we have points on at the end. They have Gromeril armor, which allows them to reroll saving throws of 1. Extremely good when they have such a good armor save. And they have Gromeril weapons, which means they get AP 1 on their attacks. That's great, guys. These guys are amazing. So they also have Runes of Protection. This unit has a 6-up ward save against any wounds suffered that were caused by non-magical enemy attacks. That's great. That's more than half, well more than half, of the weapons in the game. These guys are not going to be suffering damage from bows. These guys are not going to be suffering damage from things like Empire Spearmen, or even Halberdiers aren't going to be able to reliably kill these guys in close combat. They get a 6-up ward on top of all of their other armor. And when you stack the Anvil of Doom on them, they basically become almost unkillable for Warhammer Fantasy. So let's look at the weapons real quick. You can take a Drake fire pistol. Again, it's good, but it's nothing special. You're getting a couple of extra range attacks at the enemy army. Probably not worth spending points on. A Drake gun is the same kind of thing. It has AP -1 base with armor bane 2. Decent, but not the greatest. And where is the Cinder Blast Bomb? It's probably down here. Here it is, Cinder Blast Bombs. A unit hit by a Cinder Blast Bomb suffers D6+1 hits. So it's basically D6+1 hits with this thing. It does have quick shot like we talked about before, which means it doesn't suffer the -1 to hit or anything like that for, moving and shooting and the stand and shoot reactions, which is good. I think they're also dwarf crafted, if I'm not mistaken. No, they're not. So that is going to be a little bit of a thing, but still pretty good. Flaming attacks is good. I just don't know if it's worth 15 points, but it could be. So it's something, if you have extra points for it, it might be something that's worth it. Alright, so these guys are just great, right? And they have shield wall too, so these guys are just not going to move. They're a regimental unit as well, which means they can have a detachment of Iron Drakes. Because Iron Drakes, I believe, yes, they are a detachment. So they can be attached to the Iron Breakers. You're probably going to want one of these units attached to the Iron Breakers, but only if we have the points for it. Because really what we're taking the Iron Breakers for is to just soak up a charge from our opponent's most lethal unit. Okay, we're also going to have full command for these guys. So how much do these guys cost? Well, let's bring up our calculator real quick. Calculator. They're going to be 15 points apiece times 20. And we're going to add the full command, which is going to be 21 points plus 21. And that's it. They're going to be 321. That is expensive, but this unit can take on pretty much anything in the game and come out on top. So we're going to add 20 Iron Breakers. Full command. Now, I know what some of you are thinking right now. Proxy Hammer, but you're going to probably put a character in it. Why not shave points and make this 19 Iron Breakers with full command? Well, we can definitely do that at the end, but I don't want to do it yet because we might actually not put a unit in this. Might just be solo by itself. The reason being is because sometimes your other units like Dwarf Warriors are going to need a character to support them and be able to win combat. Iron Breakers are pretty self-sufficient. They don't really need characters to operate effectively. And I think that's also part of their lore too. So they're just really good. They don't need characters to win combat. And yeah, it's good to have a character in the unit, but it's not needed. And oftentimes you're going to be sinking too many points into one unit. Your opponent's just going to completely ignore it. If you just have the 20 Iron Breakers here, by themselves, your opponent is not going to be able to ignore, your other units in your army. Okay. So that's what we have so far. Let's just do that. Now, let's add up our points and see where we're at. It seems like right now we have something that can take on pretty much anything in our opponent's army in combat and win. We have artillery to kind of take out the opponent's biggest threats and monsters before they get in, or at least weaken them. We have 2 units of warriors that can hold positions very well to give our other units time to, maneuver around or kind of, be able to deal additional damage. And we have our rangers that slow enemy units. But what we're lacking is significant magic resistance, right? Now, dwarves have basic magic resistance in their army, makes it harder for opponents to cast magic against them, but what they don't have is the ability, just base, to dispel enemy spells, right? And this is where runesmiths and rune lords come in, specifically the Anvil of Doom. Now, the Anvil of Doom can dispel like a wizard, but it can also do insane amounts of damage or protect your units. So we're going to put one in here because it's epic. So we're going to look at the Anvil of Doom. It's probably an auto include in every dwarf army, honestly. Here it is, Anvil of Doom. So if you look at we're going to look at the abilities in just a second, but just 235 base, which we're going to just leave it at 235 for now, and we can add on later. So Anvil of Doom. Remember, this is a dwarf lord, so you can't have any more lords in your army. That's it. A king and an Anvil of Doom. That's all you can have. So we only have heroes from here on out. Okay, so that's 235. But what does it do? What does it do for us? Well, first of all, it is an immovable object. It's kind of like another artillery piece. You're going to probably want to put this just behind your front line. Reason being, it's also very tough. If something gets in combat with this, it's not going to move very easily. The Anvil Guard have very good, kind of defenses, heavy armor and shields. They're unbreakable, which means they do not break from combat. If something runs into this, they're going to be stuck there for a little bit. They have Grommeril armor. And they're also immune to psychology, so they don't have to take terror tests or panic or any of that kind of stuff. Magic resistance -3 means they can't really be targeted by spells that easily, I mean, low-level wizards just aren't going to be able to cast magic against them, and even high-level wizards are going to be reduced severely. But the real reason you take this is because of Strike the Runes. So let's take a look at Strike the Runes. So this is basically the ability to cast the following bounce spells with a power level of 3. Now, you can only cast one bounce spell per phase, even if you have multiple different types of bounce spells. So you do have to keep that in mind. But these are all technically in different phases, except for these first two. So you have to choose between them. Rune of Oath and Steel gives you +1 to your armor save and allows you to reroll failed armor saving throws. Now, it gives you +1 to your armor if you roll an 11 plus. So you need an 8 at least with power level 3 to be able to get that off, which isn't always going to happen, right? 8's pretty high, but you're always going to be able to get your, roll of a 4 plus typically. Reroll any failed armor saving throws. That is extremely good on Iron Breakers, but it's also good on Dwarf Warriors. Anything that you think your opponent is going to target, you can use this on them, and it's going to be very good. Rune of Hearth and Home basically makes all of your units immune to psychology. Also very powerful. Immune to terror bombing and fear bombing, excellent. Excellent for those types of armies that are going to try to cheese you with that kind of stuff. Rune of Haste and Urgency is a little bit harder to cast on a 10, so you need a 7 at least. But it allows you to move again, which is neat for dwarves. It gives you, the ability to get into a better position so you can charge in the next turn. Rune of Wrath and Ruin is also very good. It's a magic missile that you need a 6+ to cast. And the target enemy unit, because, power level 3, the target enemy unit within 27 inches suffers 2d6 strength 4 hits, each with an AP of -2. That AP of -2 is insane. So you can use this against like a unit of greatswords, get an average of 7 attacks. They're gonna auto hit because it's strength 4 hits, which means it's already been hit. And you're wounding on 3s against things like with toughness 3. So anything toughness 3 is going to suffer about 5 wounds on average, 5 to 6 wounds on average. That's an entire rank, basically, right? Especially at AP -2. Unless they have, really good rolls on their 6s, they're gonna die. So that's very powerful. And that's in addition to the other stuff that this allows you to do. So I definitely think this is a great option to have. And it also has rune lore, which allows them to make dispels within 24 inches because you are a level 3. You're counted as a level 3 kind of wizard. I think that's in the beginning here. We go back a little bit. Where does it say that? I knew it was somewhere. Rune lore. Maybe it's below this? I think it's below runesmiths. It's somewhere, I know that. Has to be, right? I think it's army special rules. Let's just check. Let's just make sure. Man, I can't find it now. That's of course that's going to happen to me, right? Well, I know it exists. I know rune lore is somewhere. I just can't find it right now. But it basically allows you to dispel. I think it's actually in the core rules now I think about it. Runesmiths can dispel just like wizards can. Runesmith is a level 1 wizard for dispelling. A rune lord is a level 3 or level 2, excuse me, for dispelling, and a rune lord on Anvil of Doom is a level 3. So that means you can dispel within 24 inches. Really good, right? Now you can take runes on this guy, but again, we're going to hold off on that for now until later. So where are we at? Well, we have our ability to buff our units, make them stronger so they can survive the harshest of enemy attacks. We can also move them into better positions, and we can also deal some damage to enemy units. That kind of covers that. We do have our artillery, we do have our iron breakers, we have our warriors to hold the position. What are we missing? Well, we're missing fast elements of our army, right? Now, this is all well and good, but this army is really slow, and it doesn't have a lot of ability to basically stop enemies from being able to outflank us and eventually destroy us, surround us and destroy us. So what actually helps us secure the flanks, or at least destroy enough enemy units on the flanks that our opponents aren't going to have a distinct advantage? Welcome, gyrocopters. Whenever I find them. Gosh. Wow, they're really deep down here. Okay, here we go. Gyrocopters. So gyrocopters are only 60 points apiece. They come with a steam gun and they come with full plate armor. They're not that tough, but they don't need to be. They fly 10 inches, and they can be put in the way of enemy light cav and fast cav to prevent them from getting flanks on our army. Now, they also have Vanguard, which allows them to make a move before the start of the game. Very good, especially if you get first turn, right? You can move up 10 inches with the fly 9, so that's plus your movement, and they can, move 10 inches a turn basically. That's really awesome. They also have fire and flee, but I did double check this. I thought this might be the case. Breath weapons cannot stand and shoot, and they cannot fire and flee. It is a breath weapon, unfortunately, so you don't get that with this gyrocopter. But gyrocopters are kind of more going to be used for, you could just flee as normal. You don't need to shoot it. Just flee as normal. These guns, the brimstone gun and the clatter gun, they suck anyway. So you're not going to be dealing much damage with them. They have a horrible hit chance. They're always going to be moving, which puts them, essentially ballistic skill 2. So yeah, and that's not good. And these have multiple shots, right? So if you fire with multiple shots, you're hitting on 6s. That's ridiculous. Yes, you have quick shot, but so yeah, I mean, I guess that's okay, right? You're not suffering the penalty for moving and shooting, but you're still suffering the penalty from multiple shots. So it's just, in general, it's not that good. And they also cost more points, right? They're more expensive. So what do you use gyrocopters for? Well, you use them for things like move blocking and also taking out your opponent's lighter forces on the flanks. Oftentimes, units like quarrelers are going to easily get outflanked because they don't really have the ability to move that quickly and still be able to fire full ballistic skill, whereas gyrocopters can easily do that. So, how many gyrocopters should you have in your army? Well, you're limited to 3, right, because of the rule of 3. I thought previously, before GW had that announcement, you could take a bunch of these things. You can only take really 3 in competitive play. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to just take 3 of these things. These things are going to be used for, chipping off some wounds out of units. They're also going to be used for, of course, delaying your opponent, preventing them from marching, and so forth. We want to delay our opponent as much as possible so that our war machines can fire for longer. And also, it keeps our units fresher for longer of the game. The less time your opponent has to kill your forces, the worse it's going to be for them against dwarfs. So we're also going to have 3 gyrocopters. Now they're just going to have the steam guns though, and that's it. 1 gyrocopter. Remember World of Warcraft, or no, Warcraft 3 with the gyrocopter? That was one of my favorite units in Warcraft 3, was a gyrocopter. And then he would be like, gyro! He's just such a cool guy. I always loved the gyrocopter. Unfortunately, the old gyrocopter model that I bought always fell apart, so I could never truly use it in a game. But we're gonna have 3 gyrocopters with steam guns. I should have put with steam gun here, but totally forgot that. There we go. So that's going to be our special choices. Essentially, we're not going to really have anything else with that. Steam gun. Is steam gun separated? Let's see. Oh, it is. Great. Okay. Whoops. Good thing we have this autocorrect. Alright. Don't need you. They want to correct all these weird spellings that I have here. No thanks. Okay. We have our gyrocopters. So if we pull up our calculator, we're going to still be under the 1,000 points. So if you do, 180 for the gyros, plus we have 321 for the iron breakers, plus 200 for the cannons, plus 95. So we're at 796. That's actually perfect because that means we have a little bit more points for things like runes. But we need one more thing in our list. And that is something to support our artillery. And runes can do it very easily, but one of the best models for it is the simple Master Engineer. And we're going to put that in there real quick. Master Engineer basically gets a lone op, can't be targeted while within 3 inches of a friendly war machine, and he allows you to reroll an artillery dice, which is really good. So, if you don't like the artillery dice result, you can reroll it. You do have runes for that, but this guy just has the versatility of being able to do it without, expending a rune. So it's really good for later on in the game if you can keep these guys alive. Where are these? We have Dwarf Engineers. Here they are. So we're just going to keep them at 50 points. We don't need anything. If we have some extra points, maybe we give them a handgun, but that's about it. They're only good with the handgun because they're Ballista Skill 5. That's it. So they're going to be hitting on 3+. They might kill a model here and there, but otherwise, not going to do it. Being able to reroll a single artillery dice is very powerful, which is good. Entrenchment is also decent. You can put this on your grudge thrower, make it a little bit harder to kill. That's about it. Good model for sure for 50 points. So we're going to throw one of those in there. So what do we got so far? Let's go ahead and add it up and see kind of what we can also add to this list that would make it a little bit stronger. So we got our calculator here. So we have a king at 125. We have a Thane at 85, the BSB. We have an Anvil of Doom at 235. We have a Master Engineer at 50. We have 120 for Rangers plus 195 plus 195 plus, and then we have Grudge Thrower at 95. We have 2 cannons at 200. We have 321. It's going to be pretty close, guys, and then we have 180. Okay. Now, this is really, actually, a lot of you are going to look at this and be like, oh, we don't have enough for runes. We actually do, because a lot of our models just don't need runes. I know that seems really weird to say that as a dwarf army, but we don't need runes on everything. So we have the Master Engineer, which is basically a once per turn rune, right? Reroll the artillery dice. If you roll a misfire, allows you to reroll. So let's check out some of the runes, though. We have a couple points for runes and weapons and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do. So our king is probably going to want to be pretty cheap. We're going to want to keep the king cheap but effective. So what that means is we're probably going to give the king a great weapon and maybe an armor rune to make his armor pretty good. I'm thinking great weapon, master rune, or Grommural. And I'm thinking also the Oathstone. So he can declare challenges. He's pretty tough in combat. He does some decent damage in combat. And we'll just keep it at that. Kind of a cheap king, but we'll see where our points lie. With our Thane, we're probably not going to add that much. We might add a magic standard. We might not. It just depends. So we're going to start off with the artillery, though, because we do need a couple of runes on there for sure to make sure they don't misfire on us. So we're going to go back on this, all the way to our engineering runes, which are all the way down here. So we need to make sure that our war machines aren't misfiring. That's the main thing. So here are our engineering runes. The rune of forging. So the rune of forging, single use, a war machine inscribed with rune of forging may use it to reroll a single artillery dice. It does have the asterisk, which means it can be taken multiple times. We're only going to take one of these per war machine. Now, because of the rule of pride, we cannot just use the same thing, same configuration on every single war machine. So here's a great way to get around it. All right, so we go to our army list and we put, right, actually I need to check to make sure this is this any war machine? Just, yeah, a war machine. So it doesn't matter what it is, right? In past editions, it was only cannons that could do that. So we're going to do with Rune of Forging. That's going to bring it up 15 points, so that's going to be 110. I'm also going to do this here. Whoops. It's going to be 115. And we're going to do another one with the Rune of Forging. I don't know why I put that with... It's not cannons, it's only a single cannon. Okay, so we have 115 here as well. Making so many mistakes, I'm sorry. Okay, so we have our 3 runes of forging, but we actually can't keep it like this. We need something else. So what I like to do is I actually like to give one of my war machines the rune of burning, which gives it flaming attacks. This is really good against things with regen. Now, I'm actually going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to give 2 of my war machines rune of burning. Now, rune of burning is best when used against war beasts and big beasts with regen. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the things that are going to be killing war beasts on the cannons. So rune of forging, rune of burning. I'm also going to give it a 5-point upgrade of the rune of reloading. So the rune of reloading is only 5 points. That means it can fire every turn, even if it misfired and malfunctioned. Now, the thing about this is it's never going to come into play because of the way we have everything set up. Unless you get really unlucky. But, I wouldn't. It's just to get around the rule of pride. So we have rune of burning and rune of, reloading. And that's all we need. So rune of burning, rune of reloading together is going to be 15 points. This is going to be a 130 point cannon. This is our expensive one. We have one with just a single rune of forging, and we're going to have a rune of burning as well, remember? So, and rune of burning. That's going to be 125. And then we just have our normal grudge thrower with rune of forging. Now, if we need to cut one rune of forging, we can. I would probably cut it on the grudge thrower and just kind of save the engineer for that if needed. But we can come back to that later if needed. So this is going to be in total 45 for the runes of forging. And it's going to be an additional 55, 65, 70 plus 70. So we still have 130 points for runes, which is good. But again, if we need to cut something from this, we can just cut a rune of forging off of one of these, and we can use our master engineer for that. I just typically like to have the master engineer around because the rune of forging allows you to re-roll a single misfire, right? But the artillery ability of the master engineer allows you to just roll a single artillery dice, which is different. So, being able to re-roll a 2 and make it into a 6 so that you can actually hit that enemy target or enemy war machine or whatever it is with your cannons is really important to have in your back pocket. So, anyway, rune of forging, pretty good, but not as good as the master engineer's ability. So we're going to keep that there for now. We're going to have about 130 points to spend left. So what do we do with this, right? Actually, I have to make sure I don't think we went over 1,000 points on this. Yeah, I don't think we did. I think we're at like 800 or something like that. So we're good there. All right, so core choices, we're not going to do anything here. That's just how it is. Now we can work with our lords and heroes. So the first thing you're going to want is something for the king, right? The king needs a weapon, and the king needs something defensive. So we're going to keep it cheap, though. I usually like keeping it cheap. If you do want to spend extra points on them, that's great. You could just cut some runes from the special choices, right? Or you could even, cut a model here and there. If you know your king's going to go with the Iron Breakers, all right, you can cut an Iron Breaker off, cut a Dwarf Warrior off, whatever. But be careful, because when you cut Dwarf Warriors off, you actually start to kind of dip below the minimum requirements. Right, I think we're 510, so you can actually cut one Dwarf Warrior off here and still be good. But, you can't cut too much off. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so we're going to look up, and we're going to go to what I like to call armor runes, because we need to protect our lord. Again, he's there for the leadership. He's there to survive so that our opponent can't get points for him. I think armor runes are more important than actual weapon runes. Right? You could always give your guy a great weapon, and he can always do pretty good damage. What you can't do is, necessarily is allow him to survive long enough to be able to strike. So There's a couple of options. You can give him a ward save, right? A couple of, runes of shielding. I don't typically like the runes of shielding if I don't have something else with it. What I really like is the Master Rune of Grumil. Improves his save from a 4+ to a 2+. Now, it cannot be improved in any way, which means that no shield, but you can have a great weapon, which is really good. Rune of Iron is okay, right? Puts him to 4 wounds. Again, I think that's, most enemy lords will have 4 attacks, typically. If they have a lot of magic items and gear, they're going to have like 5 attacks. If they're hitting your Dwarf Lord on 4s, they hit about 3 times. If they're wounding them on 3s, they only wound like once. Or twice, excuse me. So you have 2 chances to save on a 2+, maybe they have -2 armor. Most likely you're not going to get one-shotted. So I like the Master Rune of Grumil. I also like the Master or the Rune of Preservation as well. I don't think we have the points for it, but that's a good second, right? Is immune to both the Killing Blow and multiple runes X special rules, which is, will help him survive. So this is, and remember he also has Grumil armor as well, so, he can get that reroll. So what I would do is I would take the Master Rune of Grumil. So we have 45 points right there. King, and a great weapon, which I think is 6 points with great weapon. Whoops. Great weapon. Master Rune of Grumil. And I think we want to give him the Oat Stone. Because it basically makes it impossible for your opponent to decline challenges. So an Oat Stone is 15 points, I believe. So let's look at this. So he has, all right, the Master and Grumil, great weapon. So let's go back up to the King and see where we're at now. Okay, so great weapon is only 4 points, which is great. You have the great weapon. We didn't take a shield or pistols or anything like that. We took the Oat Stone, which is 15 points. So let's see what the Oat Stone does. Challenges cannot be refused. In addition, character may automatically pass any panic tests. Oh, yes, that's great, right? That's why I like that thing. Okay, so we have 140. So let's just bring up our calculator real quick. We have plus 15 for the Oat Stone, plus 45 for the armor rune, plus 4 for the great weapon. Okay, so we're in 1935. That's actually perfect. That means we can put something on our Thane and, maybe a magic standard or maybe some, armor runes to keep them alive. So that is going to be, sorry, let's just remember 1935. Gosh, I'm bad at math. We have 125 plus 45 plus 4 plus 15. Okay, 189, and of course, plus 125. Is he that much? I messed up. I know it. Okay, so we have 45 plus a great weapon plus 15. That's what it is. Okay, now we add 125 to that. Okay, we're at 189. Not bad. 189 points. Okay, pretty good. So we're at 1935. Which means we can have 65 points of runes on our Thane. So let's take a look at some of the different standard runes, and then we'll go ahead and look at some other stuff. Maybe some defensive runes, but let's look at the standard. Oh, I went too far, and now I'm into Empire. We don't want to take allies, guys. Okay. Jeez, that was bad. Just dumb of me to do. Okay. Come on. Come on. Okay, here we go. Standard runes. So there's a couple things we can do here. We can't really use the Master Rune of Grumil. We don't have the points for it. I also think it's kind of just redundant, right? Gives the unit 5+ ward save, but if we join him with Iron Breakers, we're already going to be getting a 6-up ward save. I know it's against anything, but still, 80 points is a lot to pay for it. And a 6-up ward save with friendly units within 6 inches. Again, that's going to be probably one other unit, maybe 2 other units if you pack them together pretty tight. And it's within the model, so it's probably only going to be 2 units, guys. Which, it looks good on paper, but it's not as good as... it's not that great. It does help the Ironbreaker survive, but I would actually rather put this on something like a unit of hammers, which is a little bit more fragile. So we're not going to use that. We can't use this. We only have 65 points. Now, Master Rune of Hesitation. Now, this could be good. Let's take a look at this. An enemy unit that charges the front arc of a unit carrying the standard does not count as having charged for the purposes of choosing which weapon to use or any special rules it might have. Now, this is good, but against Ironbreakers, it probably doesn't matter. Like, if we're putting, realistically, if we're putting our standard with Ironbreakers, right? The unit that's not going to die, you're not going to want this. And because of that, you might actually want to put your standard there because your Ironbreakers are probably going to be the unit that you want to keep alive and in the fight for the longest. So you're probably not going to want that. Rune of Confusion makes a disorder charge, so units charging make a disorder charge. That's good because of the initiative, but again, the Ironbreakers don't really care too much about that, and neither do the warriors, right? A lot of our forces are just based on holding the enemy in place so that our other elements can wipe them out with shooting. And we're really beating them in combat res, we're not really beating them in damage. So that's something to keep note of. We're beating them in combat resolution, so this isn't the greatest. Rune of Fear causes fear. Pretty good, leadership check, basically. If they fail it, they can't charge, which is good. Rune of Battle, +1 to your combat result, which is great. That's a +2 in total. That's going to be +1 for the Rune of Battle and +1 for just having a battle standard. This also stacks with your regular standard. So this is actually a pretty good thing to have because this actually gives you a lot of combat res. Storraz's rune gives you Vanguard, not going to need that. Rune of Courage passes any fear or terror checks required to make. And again, you're probably not going to need this because you brought an Anvil of Doom, right? An Anvil of Doom allows you to essentially just kind of ignore that with Immune to Psychology. So I'm thinking we just go with the classic Rune of Battle. I love it. It's a great rune, and it also allows us to take some armor runes on our BSB. So let's just do that. Let's just do Rune of Battle. Fairly simple, right? With Rune of Battle, that's going to put us up to 110. And, excuse me, sorry, I'm getting a little excited here. We're going to go +25, and we have 40 points left. So let's look at some defensive runes here and see what 40 points can do us. Excuse me, gosh, hiccups. That's the problem with doing these live things, is sometimes like you guys hear that kind of stuff. I'm going to take a sip of coffee real quick, excuse me. Okay, so we know this guy has 2 runes, so the Rune of Preservation really isn't going to be that good. I'm thinking we actually spend on something. Now, we can't buy Master Runes anymore, right? Because we basically don't have the points, and also we've already used the Master Rune of Gromural. This guy is not trying to do damage. He's trying to survive. So I like a couple of different ones on this guy. We can give him the Rune of Iron, which gives him +1 wound. So now he has the wounds of a lord. This means he's harder to actually kill in combat. That's really good. We can also combine that with the Rune of Stone. So it allows him to reroll a single failed armor saving throw, which is, again, it's good. But I'm thinking we can actually give this guy a shield and basically get +1 armor, so that's not going to be as good. So I'm going to actually suggest that we just give this guy 2 runes of shielding. And I know what you guys might think about this. It's not that good, 5+ word. Yeah, it's not great, but you get to use it after your armor. So we're going to combine that with a shield. We're going to give him a 3+ armor save. Remember, he gets to reroll a failed result of 1. If he's with the Ironbreakers, he's part of the unit, so he's getting +1 to his armor save as well. So we're going to actually do the runes of shielding. So what we're going to do, we're going to give him 2 runes of shielding. We have a Rune of Battle, 2 runes of shielding, and shield. And a shield. And I think he can, let's see how many points a shield is real quick. I know rune of shielding is, or 2 runes of shielding is 30 points. And again, I mean, for 30 points, you get a 5 aboard. That's an amazing budget. Shield is 2 points. So that's great. Okay, so he gets 30 points for the runes of warding. Plus, whoops, great. Messed up there. Okay, we're at 1960. We got the 2 runes of shielding there. So that's going to give us a 5 of ward save. So he has 90, so we're going to give a +2 for the shield. He has 8 points left. Is there anything here we can take for 8 points? I just want to check something real quick. In addition to their usual allowance for points spent on... Okay, so they can take regular armor. Okay, that's what I thought. Alright. We basically can't do much here. So we have 8 points. Remember when I said, well, we could give him more armor runes, right? We can give him 1 more armor rune. So let's well, that doesn't really help that much, but let's see. Or a weapon rune. We'll check out the runes and we'll see what 5-point runes we can give whoever. We can't give any weapon runes to our Thane, so that doesn't really matter, or Lord, I mean, so that doesn't really matter, but let's check this out. This is actually really good. Move through cover for 5 points. That's fantastic. Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay, this is pretty funny. So we can actually give our Dwarf Lord a Rune of the Furnace for a 3+ ward against any wound that suffered from attacks with the Flaming Attack special rule. This is actually really good because a lot of enemy generals that are duelists will have flaming weapons because they want to cut through regen. So this is actually a really good tech for only 5 points. Let's go and just throw that in there, right? Let's go and throw that in there. So we have the Rune of the Furnace, which is 5 points. Now, I did want to take a Rune of Spellbreaking as well, but I don't think we're going to have... I mean, it's good, but I just don't know if it's going to be that useful because we already have a Rune Lord that's, dispelling with +3. We already have, -2 and -1 magic resistance pretty much across the board. We might move some things around to take one of these, but for now, let's just use the Rune of the Furnace on our Dwarf Lord. So this is going to be, okay, so we need, Master Rune Cromhill, Rune of the Furnace, 3-up ward save, and that's going to be 94. And we have, let me add this up again, hold on. So we have 110, oops, plus 30 plus 2, 142. I feel like I didn't need to use the calculator for that, but whatever. Okay, now we're pretty set. We have basically everything we need here. We have a couple of more points. I think we have like 3 more points. Can we do anything for 3 points that's worth anything? Let's look at the Master Engineer and see what we can give him. Because maybe we can give him something for 3 points. No, we can't give him anything, so that's great. Can't do anything. Can't even give him a great weapon. Let's see. Can we give... Gosh, can we give this guy anything for 3 points? Nope. He already has a shield, so doesn't need that. What about our Dwarf Lord of Thane? Can we give anything for 3 points? Well, I mean... I guess we could just take a shield on the Dwarf Lord too, so we can have a... I mean, it's at this point, it doesn't even matter, but... Yeah, let's just do that. Let's just give him a shield just for the hell of it. So, King with great weapon, shield. You're not going to be able to use both, but, if there's something that, picks him out of the unit, like a, Wood Elf attack or something like that, that, like, has precision or something, that might be okay. So, might actually do something, who knows. So he has great weapon, shield. Is this even spelled right? Nope, it wasn't. Shield, Master of the Grummiel, Rune of the Furnace, and a Notestone. Boom. And he's under 200 points. That's what you call a budget lord. Pretty decent. We have a Thane here. Boom, got that. So if we wanted to make points for runes of spellbreaking, what I would do is I'd actually get rid of a get rid of a gyrocopter, and I'd put 2 runes of spellbreaking on my Anvil of Doom, and there you go. And that's it. So if you wanted to make that change to your list, you could. And I'm even thinking, just looking at this list now, I'm even thinking that's a good idea. Because 3 gyrocopters is probably a little much. You probably only need 2, 1 in each flank to kind of slow the enemy down and do what you need to do. I think erasing this gyrocopter here and putting 2 runes of spellbreaking on this guy and putting another, maybe an armor rune on him or something like that would be a good idea. Let's take a look real quick. Let's just take a look at runes, see what we got as far as armor for 10 points. Or talisman runes. Well, we can't do Rune of the Furnace again, but is there something for 10? No, we don't have anything for 10. Look at that. What about armor? Yeah, I mean, I guess a Rune of Stone, right? You could have a couple runes of stone on something. That's nice. Or Rune of Fire on your, Thane. Or not Thane, yeah, your Thane's weapon, so he gets flaming attacks. Yeah, again, not bad, right? And again, models with flaming attacks also cause fear against units with regen as well, I think. Or, no, not regen, vulnerability to fire. So that is actually pretty good. And in some cases, it actually just negates fear from that unit, right? If a fear-causing unit tries to fight another fear-causing unit, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but they cancel. But that may be an old edition that I'm thinking, so just let me know. Okay, so yeah, I think we basically got it here. You can kind of play around with the runes a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. Now, you'll notice I didn't use a lot of weapon runes, and that's just because this particular list doesn't have a focus on damage, right? This particular list has a focus on holding in place and dealing damage with your ranged units, of which they are very good, right? And preserving your units that aren't ranged units. So preserving your big blocks of warriors, your most expensive blocks of warriors are going to be preserved. Your king is, more of a cheaper defensive type kind of character. Same with your Thane is very defensive, right? You have defensive units so that you don't have to worry about losing them and losing those VP to your opponent. And of course, because you have the Oathstone, if your opponent comes at you with like a wizard or something like that, in a unit and it has, unit champion stuff, you can declare challenges and they can't refuse it. So over the course of a couple turns, you can actually wipe out their wizard or, their kind of hero or whatever pretty easily. You have a 2+ save yourself. You have Grummiel armor, so you're re-rolling, that 1 to, failed 1 as well. And also, just in general, you do have the ability to reroll all of your saves because of the Anvil of Doom. So I think you have a pretty balanced list here. We're probably going to do some other types of list building like later on in a different video. If we wanted to do a pure combat dwarf army, what would that look like? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, we're not going with shields, right? We're going to need to do more damage, so we're probably going to go with things like great weapons. We're probably not even going to go with warriors. We're probably going to do something more along the lines of longbeards for our core choice. And for our special, we're going to go into hammers and things like that instead of, these cannons and stuff. Because if you have a dwarf combat army and you're going to want to advance towards your opponent, you're not going to want these, right? So yeah, but that's basically, I think this is pretty competitive. We have no rare choices. I know we were going to think about putting Iron Drakes in here, but I just don't think we had the points for it. I think we would really have had to actually just get rid of another gyrocopter to put that in there, which we could do. I mean, there's a couple changes here and there that we could do for that, but I just don't think it's worth it. I think 20 Ironbreakers on their own, detachment or no detachment, is enough to take on most things in the game. I think that's kind of overkill. It's kind of sad that our rare choices are so bad, but it is what it is. All right, that is going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. I know fantasy content isn't why a lot of you guys are into this channel, but I did want to kind of talk to you guys about how to build a fantasy style list. The best thing to always do is try to figure out what your list wants to do. This was a list that was very similar to what I ran in 7th and 8th edition. It did very well for me then, and I think if you are playing dwarfs, it could do fairly well for you in Old World. I am going to have more fantasy content later on, but it's going to be sporadic. It's not going to be, I'm not going to try to do it, twice a week or anything like that. Mostly going to be focusing on Eldar content. But yeah, definitely stay tuned for some fantasy content. Next up is a review of the High Elves forces. So we're going to be looking at High Elves, and then we're probably going to build a High Elf list as well. And I have a couple of ideas of what's good on High Elves. One of my buddies, not really buddies, I guess, but a guy I played at the game shop. He's been in contact with our group and he's been playing more games. He has a pretty good high elf list and runs a lot of Seaguard in it, and it's pretty effective actually. So, I'm probably going to go and talk about that a little bit more when we do our review. And like always, if you guys want to support the channel, I have free trials on my Patreon activated, which will grant you access to our Discord. It's a permanent access as well. You don't lose it by, not giving money or whatever. It's a free trial, so that means free. You can always cancel the free trial and, remain in the Discord, which is what I want. I want you guys in the Discord, and I'll probably have like a fantasy channel at some point, added on there. And I'm also an Amazon affiliate and have a channel store page, so if you want to grab some Eldar inspired apparel, or you want to grab some discounted Eldar miniatures on Amazon, via the affiliate link, check that out in the description. I will have those for you, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.